Happy Friday, everybody. Sam Shapiro back here with more of your Heat latest on FanArc. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and, of course, drop a like on this video. We've got content Monday through Friday right here every week, all pertaining to the Miami Heat. And today's episode, we're going to start off with Pat Riley's perspective, just my opinion on just some of the takes that I've seen through multiple reports online, and it's very interesting. It seems Pat Riley is reportedly content with the current roster that Miami has kind of put together, at least going into this 2025-26 NBA season. And he believes they can compete in a fairly weaker Eastern Conference that we've seen over the last couple of seasons, rather. Seeing the likes of guys like Tyrese Haliburton and Jason Tatum go down with the same injury, as well as Damian Lillard now departing out of the Eastern Conference. He hopes for better health and consistency from the overall core players of his team. I know Tyler Herro probably being one of those players. This year, this past season rather, I feel like he's demonstrated a little bit more consistency with being able to stay healthy and being able to just be present in more games in terms of coming from a health standpoint from seasons, prior to this past season. But it's very interesting. I definitely am hoping that a lot of the players can maintain the health going forward into this season as well. He's looking for, right now at least, a player that can consistently score 25 points per game, along with players contributing in the 19-21 point range. Acquiring a guy like Norman Powell over this past offseason definitely kind of fits that bill in some regard, but maybe getting one or two more players that kind of fit that bill as well would be very complimentary to the team that Miami is putting together right now. And they definitely have some pieces like Kel'el Ware that could develop into a player like that. But I definitely agree that adding another 25 plus point per game score to this team is really what ultimately they need, kind of to give them the ultimate boost to be a finals contender, Eastern Conference finals type team, to be in a contention for that spot. Despite being in a weaker Eastern Conference this year, you still kind of have the likes of the Cavaliers and the New York Knicks kind of being at the forefront of what is going to look like the 2025-26 NBA season in the Eastern Conference. Now, Riley wants a team to focus on winning and play well to maintain positive vibes, especially after the post-Jimmy Butler era and after trading Butler to the Warriors back in last February. Miami is now looking to rebuild, obviously, around Bam Adebayo and Tyler Herro. I think Norman Powell, again, a great addition to the roster that has currently kind of taken shape over these past couple of months. Andrew Wiggins being a great add to the team as well. And really just seeing how some of these Summer League players have developed, hopefully can kind of come in and maybe contribute a little bit to the success that Miami has kind of been able to garner, even as a 10th seed last year, being one of their not as strong seasons, one of their weaker seasons just over the last 15 seasons, really. So again, I think the pieces are definitely there, and I think that Riley being content with the roster is definitely fair and warranted, but there's definitely a little bit more need in terms of the scoring front, and especially losing offensive assets like Duncan Robinson over this past year. They're definitely going to need another 20-point scorer in addition to Powell. Hopefully, Kel'el Ware can kind of develop into that, assuming Miami doesn't really acquire any major superstars over the next couple of months or at the beginning of the regular season, just because Miami doesn't like to give up especially a lot of draft assets and key players in the rotation for a superstar type player, as we saw this offseason, them passing up on the Kevin Durant sweepstakes. So I kind of understand where Riley is coming from in terms of wanting those things, but if you're going to want a 25 point per game score, you're really going to need to give up more assets. And I understand wanting to hang on to those and developing that, but it's going to take time if you're not willing to give up some of the pieces right now. Drop in the comments if you think Miami, banking on those assets, developing into something, are more worth it than maybe trading them away for a superstar. I know we've kind of been going through hypothetical what if trade scenarios that Miami could maybe look into. A lot of them not confirmed, just because Miami, I feel like, hasn't really been involved in any major trade talks, especially this past summer, for superstar players, with the exception of, like I just mentioned, Kevin Durant, potentially looking at adding Damian Lillard to some extent. And just, because of those things really not working out, I don't really see them being in the forefront to maybe give up a whole lot of assets for a superstar, at least right now. and being content with the roster you have, you kind of have to be, because you're not willing to give up those pieces for a superstar. So drop in the comments if you think Miami giving up a lot of assets for a superstar player might be worth it or not. Personally, I like how Miami has been able to develop some of the assets they've brought in, whether it's been undrafted players, late second round picks, late first round picks, and then just simple trade acquisitions they've made over the past couple of seasons that have developed into, very focal rotation pieces. Unfortunately, a lot of the guys we've seen develop over the last couple of years, Max Strus, Caleb Martin, and now Duncan Robinson, all becoming very strong players in the rotation, now no longer on the team, but it's kind of interesting to see. I feel like a lot of them haven't been the players they were in Miami on some of those other teams. So I think it's interesting, Miami being able to not just develop those guys, but bring out the best in their strengths, and seeing how other teams haven't been able to do that going forward. But moving over to some more trade hypotheticals. Again, this is not confirmed in any way, shape, or form. I just thought it would be an interesting thing to propose. A lot of proposals interesting regarding Tyler Herro's extension have kind of been brought up, a lot of what if scenarios. So I was kind of just thinking today, would there ever be a scenario where Miami would trade or would try to trade Tyler Herro in a deal to the Knicks for Jalen Brunson? I think Brunson, obviously a much more talented guard than Tyler Herro, just because of that clutch factor. Not saying Tyler Herro is not a clutch player by any means necessary. Both high volume scorers, but Jalen Brunson clearly one of two leaders on this New York Knicks team that I really thought should have made the NBA Finals this year. Tyrese Halliburton getting the last laugh over them this past postseason, but Brunson's been very, very close to punching the Knicks a chip to the NBA Finals time and time again now. And I just think with this Knicks roster, he has just proved to not only be an insane leader, but has really put the team on his back, especially Thibodeau not really utilizing the depth of the Knicks roster. So by the time they got to the Eastern Conference Finals this year, he looked pretty beaten down. So I think that, if Miami were to include certain assets like Tyler Herro and maybe some draft assets, or, a young player, or, Tyler Herro and Wiggins for a guy like Brunson, that could be a little bit more of a decent deal than some of the deals I've kind of seen in response to if Miami would ever propose a trade for Tyler Herro and would go for a rebuild. I think you bring in Brunson, Miami doesn't necessarily have to rebuild with building blocks like Brunson, Bam Adebayo, and Kel'el Ware at the forefront of the team. And just because of the type of guard Brunson has been able to become in Miami, I just think it would be a very interesting it'd be interesting to see Brunson in the mix with that team over Miami. I'm not entirely sure if you'd say he'd be a better complementary guard to Bam and Kel'el Ware than he has been to Karl Anthony Towns, but because of what they bring on the defensive prowess, I think Brunson's offensive game would add so much more to, the Heat team really overall. And I could see that team potentially making the finals just because of how Brunson has gotten the Knicks so close, and during the regular season has been, a driving force for them, especially just over the last two seasons especially. So drop in the comments if you think Miami trading for Jalen Brunson would be arguably worth it if they had to add additional assets to it. I think in some scenarios it could be worth it. Would definitely not want to see Tyler Herro go, but I definitely think Brunson is a star guard to the caliber of Tyler Herro, and is arguably a much better player on both sides of the ball. Offensively, just as good, if not better. A very clutch player, and really led this Knicks team. So I don't know if the Knicks would ever consider doing that just because of Tyler's woes, defensively overall. But I definitely think that would be a trade that could possibly benefit both teams, both giving them at least filling those niches in terms of a clutch scorer and an offensive juggernaut in both Tyler Herro and Jalen Brunson. And moving over to another guard that is hopefully going to make a splash in South Beach this upcoming season, Kasparas Jakucionis, obviously drafted with the 20th overall pick in this past draft. In the beginning of the summer league, his play looked very concerning, was not really shooting the ball well, turned the ball over, I believe, roughly a dozen times in just a few games. I believe it was 3 or 4, but ultimately kind of finding his game more in Las Vegas play when some of the games shifted over there. And it was a little bit more reassuring to see him kind of come into his own towards the second half of the summer league. But it kind of raised the question: how long should Miami, give Kasparis to really develop as a point guard in the system? Do they ever see him becoming a starting point guard so that Tyler could kind of move his way more into a true, shooting guard position? That way the two are kind of sharing the backcourt and you have two playmaking guards running the offense in the backcourt. I mean, Kasparis clearly showed time and time again he can make those tough shots. He's a deep range scorer and he's an absolute playmaker. So he definitely fits the mold of what Miami is looking for in terms of a great facilitator that can score. But, there were definitely some worries in the summer league this past, couple of months. And I think that if the game you kind of see him play over the next season, looks like that, I mean, it raises the question: do you see him as kind of a piece that you could maybe ship off for a superstar type of player with one or two other players and draft assets? I mean, Miami has made it clear time and time again that they don't want to, trade a bunch of assets for one superstar type player, even though when they do bring in superstars, it typically tends to be a recipe for success. But I just think in the grand scheme of things, Miami should try to be patient with Jakucionis, at least give him 2 or 3 seasons to kind of get, some NBA experience under his belt and really develop as a point guard, because I do think he has the potential to be a star guard in the NBA. Drop in the comments how patient you think Miami should be if they ever do consider trying to trade him, how long they should maybe give him time to really develop and be patient with developing the offense, really finding his feet defensively and just being an asset, hopefully, to Miami's backcourt in the future. And that brings up another interesting topic that I was thinking about: future prospects. Obviously, in trade rumors and talks over the summer, Miami kind of being under the undertone under a lot of them, it kind of made me think about some maybe future superstars that, if they don't end up in Miami over the next season, could potentially over the next 3 or 4. And I think it's just 2 that really come to mind. The first one being Trae Young, definitely has bolstered the Atlanta Hawks at the entire time he's really been there. But, there were some talks about him maybe going to the Lakers or potentially, bouncing out of Atlanta. And then, it raised the question: could you ever see a guard like Trae Young coming to the 305? If it was involving a trade, Miami would almost definitely have to give up Tyler Herro, I think, in a deal for that. But I think if you're able to hang on to Tyler Herro in that regard, Trae Young and Tyler Herro in that backcourt would be absolutely disgusting. And I think that, in seasons future, whether it's, multiple years down the line or just, in a year or two, if they get him in a sign and trade or something like that, could definitely add a lot of value to this team. He would be a superstar that would take Miami to the next level. And then Ja Morant, obviously, a freak of nature in terms of athleticism, a true dynamic guard that could be unbelievable. And I just think that would also be a great addition to the backcourt as well. Drop in the comments if you think maybe probably would not be next season, but maybe in 3 or 5 seasons, if you could see maybe the next arc of those point guards potentially balling out in Miami and bolstering them. I don't want to say in a LeBron James type of way, but when Jimmy Butler came to Miami, nobody expected that he was going to bring an 8th seed Miami team into a picture to, go all the way and potentially bring home an NBA title. And I just think that now when you have superstars that are potentially not doing that for their current franchises, you can kind of always raise that what if scenario with a lot of different superstars. These 2 guards being, I think, potentially those type of players that could complement a guy like Bam Adebayo. And if Kel'el Ware develops into the type of player we're all hoping that he's going to, then, I mean, yeah, that's in either scenario with Ja Morant, Bam Adebayo, or Kel'el Ware, or if you swap Trae Young in there, I mean, those 2 big threes are absolutely disgusting just to think about on paper. So drop in the comments if you think maybe somewhere in the near future, whether it's 2030, 2035, or hopefully even earlier, those scenarios would benefit Miami. That's going to do it for today's episode of your Heat Latest here on FanArc. Once again, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Again, happy Friday, everybody, and thanks so much for joining us. I'm Sam Shapiro. Have a great day.